The cry came from the canyon, sharp, high, and full of terror. "Please, help her, my mommy, she's tied to the rock." The voice carried across the dry wind, cutting through the silence of the desert like a knife. Jake Carter reined in his horse at once, his heart thudding hard beneath his dusty shirt. He had been riding for days through Apache territory, alone and cautious, knowing that one wrong step could cost him his life. But that cry, it wasn't a trap. It was too real, too desperate. He turned his horse toward the sound and spurred it forward, the hooves kicking up a trail of red dust. As he rode into the narrow canyon, the air shimmered with heat. The walls glowed orange in the sun, and the ground was cracked and thirsty. And then he saw her. A woman, her skin the color of the desert earth, her dark hair tangled and falling over her shoulders, was bound tightly against a massive rock. Thick ropes cut into her wrists and ankles. Her dress, made of buckskin and beadwork, was scorched by the sun. She wasn't moving, and standing nearby, barefoot and trembling, was a little girl with braids down her back, no older than 7. Tears streaked her dusty face. "Please," she sobbed again, "they said she did magic, they left her to die." Jake's throat tightened. He swung off his horse and knelt beside the girl. "Who did this?" he asked. "The men from the fort." She nodded, her small shoulders shaking. "They said she called the spirits. They said she cursed the river." Jake looked up at the woman again. Her chest rose faintly, she was still alive. The sun was merciless, burning down on her bare skin. Without another thought, Jake drew his knife and began sawing at the ropes. The strands were rough, dry, and hot to the touch. As he worked, he could feel eyes on him, somewhere beyond the rocks, the desert watching, silent and still. When the last rope snapped free, the woman fell into his arms. Her body was limp, her lips cracked, her pulse faint. "Water," Jake muttered, pulling his canteen and holding it to her mouth. She drank weakly, her eyelids fluttering open just enough for him to see her eyes, dark, fierce, full of pain and fire. "Why?" she rasped. "Why would you help me?" Jake smiled faintly, though his voice trembled. "Because it's the right thing to do." The little girl clung to his arm. "Will she live?" she whispered. He nodded, though he wasn't sure. "She will," he said firmly. "She has to." The woman's breathing steadied slowly, her hand twitching weakly as she reached for her daughter. The child knelt beside her, crying softly. The moment was fragile, sacred, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Then, from somewhere in the distance, came the sound of horses. The men from the fort were returning. Jake looked up sharply. Dust clouds rose on the horizon, 6 riders, armed and fast. He cursed under his breath. "We've got to move," he said, lifting the woman carefully into his arms. She was light, too light, her skin fevered. He carried her to his horse, tying her gently across the saddle. "Hold on tight," he told the girl, helping her climb up behind him. The riders, shouts echoed through the canyon now. "Go," he whispered to his horse. The animal leapt forward, muscles straining as they galloped toward the mountain pass. The wind tore at his face, the ground a blur beneath them. Arrows whistled past, one striking the saddle horn. Jake ducked low, his arms around the woman to shield her. The girl buried her face against his back. The sun flashed over them, the canyon walls closing in. Then, suddenly, the woman stirred. Her head lifted weakly, her eyes glowing faintly in the light. She whispered something in Apache, low, rhythmic, almost a chant. The air around them shifted. The wind changed direction, rising into a swirling gust that blinded their pursuers. Dust devils danced across the trail, kicking up walls of sand. When Jake looked back, the riders were gone, lost in the storm she had summoned. He turned back to her, stunned. Her eyes met his. "You should have left me," she whispered. "You don't know what I am." Jake shook his head, gripping the reins tighter. "I know enough," he said. "You're someone's mother, and you're alive because I don't let people die tied to rocks." As they rode out of the canyon and into the open desert, the wind softened, the sky deepened into gold. The little girl held her mother's hand, tears drying on her cheeks. For the first time in hours, the land was quiet again. But somewhere behind them, in the shadowed cliffs, a single feather drifted down onto the sand, black as midnight, pulsing faintly with light. The woman saw it and turned her head away, whispering something Jake couldn't understand. Something that sounded like both a prayer and a warning. By the time the sun sank behind the mesas, Jake Carter had found a shallow cave at the edge of the desert. It was half hidden behind a tangle of thorn bushes, a hollow of shade and stone. He carried the woman inside carefully, her body limp against his chest, and laid her on a blanket near the fire he quickly built from dry mesquite branches. The little girl crouched beside her mother, brushing sand from her face with small, trembling hands. The flames flickered softly, painting the cave walls in golden red. Outside, the desert exhaled, and the night grew cool. Jake poured a little water onto a cloth and pressed it to the woman's forehead. Her breathing steadied, her chest rising and falling with slow strength. He had seen fever, seen dying before, but this was different. There was something wild in her, something the heat hadn't burned away. When her eyes finally opened, they glowed faintly in the firelight. "You risked your life for me," she murmured, her voice rough but steady. "You don't even know my name." Jake shook his head. "Doesn't matter," he said quietly. "Names can come later. First, you need rest." The little girl looked up. "Her name is Naira," she said softly, her dark eyes wide and unblinking. "And I'm Asha." Jake smiled faintly. "Pretty names," he said. "I'm Jake Carter." He looked back at Naira, her gaze still fixed on him, sharp and unreadable. "You're from the fort," she said suddenly, her tone turning cold. "One of them," he hesitated. He admitted. "I was a soldier once." "Not anymore." The silence stretched, heavy and tight. The fire cracked. "They took my people's land," she said. "Burned our water spirit's shrine. When I prayed for rain to return, they called it witchcraft. So they tied me to the rock." Jake's jaw tightened. "I'm not like them," he said quietly. "I left when I saw what they did. I don't fight for men who kill the helpless." Naira studied him for a long time, her expression softening just enough for the tension to ease. "Then you're a man out of place," she said finally. "Like a hawk that forgot how to fly." Her words carried weight, a strange sadness that filled the air. Asha curled against her mother, already half asleep, her head resting on her lap. Jake fed more wood to the fire, his eyes tracing the patterns of shadows on the cave walls. Something about those shapes moved, slowly, rhythmically. Then he realized it wasn't shadows. It was symbols, marks burned faintly into the rock, glowing as if alive. "What is that?" he asked. Naira followed his gaze. "The spirits of the land," she whispered. "They listen, they remember." She reached out, her fingers brushing one of the glowing symbols. It pulsed beneath her touch, and suddenly, the air in the cave grew warmer, denser. Jake felt the weight of something unseen pressing down, watching. "You shouldn't have untied me," she said softly. "Now they know you." Her words made his heart tighten. "Who knows me?" he asked. "The spirits," she nodded. "The watchers of the canyon. The ones bound beneath the stones. They saw what you did, they marked you. The desert doesn't forget acts of mercy." Jake frowned, not sure if he should feel grateful or afraid. "Marked me for what?" he asked. Naira's eyes flickered toward the cave mouth, where the moonlight shone on the sand. "For destiny," she whispered. "For debt." The wind outside howled suddenly, carrying strange echoes that almost sounded like voices. Asha stirred in her sleep. Naira reached for her daughter's hair, murmuring words in Apache that Jake didn't understand, but the moment she spoke them, the wind calmed. "You have power," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I have the old ways," she replied. "Not power, just balance. But when they tied me to that rock, they broke the balance. Now the land cries out." Jake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Then we'll fix it," he said. "Whatever they broke, whatever they took, we'll make it right." Naira looked at him long and hard, as if weighing his soul. "You speak like a fool," she said finally. "But a brave one." She touched his hand, just for a heartbeat. Her skin was cool now, her strength returning. "At dawn," she said, "we go east. To the spirit well. If it still lives, it can heal the land, and me." Jake nodded, though unease rippled through him. "And if it doesn't?" She looked into the fire, her face unreadable. "Then the desert will take us all." Outside, the moon hung full and pale over the canyon, and far in the distance, a lone coyote howled, a cry that sounded almost human. Jake sat awake long after the fire died, staring at the faint glow of the runes on the walls. He didn't know if he'd saved a woman, or unleashed something the desert had been holding prisoner for too long.